And what excites you the most about the value opportunity for Square there? Is it just processing transactions? I know on their new slide deck they released, they put that as a big sliver. Is it lending to these small businesses? Is it software services on top, like managing payroll or that kind of stuff? Or where do you see the value? Or is it that entire ecosystem coming together like never before, really?
Yeah, I think I really believe in the latter part where they've done such a good job of putting a hook out there for small businesses, and that's the credit card processing. And then in order to get businesses on new products, it doesn't actually take that much. So if I'm a payroll provider today, I'm not even talking about Square. It costs me a lot of money to acquire a new customer, right? Whereas if I'm Square, I already have a huge base of customers that I can sell into. And so their customer acquisition costs are much, much lower. And that's a theme that we see and we've been following, not just on the small business side, but also on the consumer side with the Cash App. It's that customer acquisition cost is so low that it allows them to be much more creative than traditional businesses.
And now we can get a little deeper because this is actually something I really wanted to cover, which is you said you worked in the small business or the lending part of Square, right?
Yep.
Because that's sort of what is the crux of the issue now is a lot of people are concerned like, oh, this whole slowdown with the current economic crisis is going to cause less people to go, which could hurt this sort of loan portfolio of Square. So I'm curious if you could talk about that. And then also the opportunity there, because I see so much like when I think of if you go to a bank and try and get a loan for your business, like that just seems so old school versus, Square looking at all of your data in real time, seeing your transactions, seeing how much you make per day, and then using that and sort of this automated approach to just ping their most, efficient sellers and give them capital when they need it. It just seems like sort of the 2.0 version of small business lending. And I know they're like, they do a little bit of, I think it was like 2.4 billion in loans last year. It's not growing like crazy, but I feel like that business alone has huge, huge potential. And given that you worked on it and now with this whole crisis, it's kind of coming to top of mind. I'm curious if you could like give us some insight into that piece of Square.
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty interesting time to be talking about Square Capital. Yeah, I mean, I would say like, just taking a step back, one of the common themes, Square Capital had started shortly before I joined the company. But I think what was most interesting was basically that in talking with merchants, we realized that they were having, really big issues growing, and a lot of that revolved around getting access to credit. So what Square has done is sort of flip the paradigm in that if you were a small business prior to joining Square, you would have to go to a bank and fill out a paper application. What Square does now is they look at the credit card processing, and based off the credit card processing that they're seeing in real time, they will put an offer in front of these merchants. So it's a proactive outreach saying, hey, you could qualify for up to this amount if you go through this application process based on what we're seeing today. So I think that's a really interesting point. And again, going back to the customer acquisition cost theme, they're already sitting right in front of the customer. They're a trusted entity with these small business partners. So it puts them at a really unique point, in that funnel. I would say, just given recent events around coronavirus, I thought the company actually did a pretty good job alleviating investors' concerns around the loan portfolio. One of the things that they stated, which wasn't as widely known, is that Square sells the majority of the loans off to third-party investors. So they're sharing the risk with these third parties, and the third parties are interested in that they can get access to higher yielding, debt instruments. So I think that's pretty interesting. It remains to be seen, what's going to happen. We're particularly interested in any potential stimulus like flowing through Square directly to businesses, because if we go back to what's the value proposition for Square Capital, it's that businesses can not only apply for a loan, but they can get access to those funds in 1 to 2 business days. Now, if we compare that to traditional lenders, we're talking about a 2-week time frame typically, at best, going through an application process and whatnot. And Max and I have spent the better part of the last couple of weeks talking a lot about this. Is just in an unprecedented market drawdown where you see 30% of the value just fall out of nowhere, or not necessarily out of nowhere, but all of a sudden you need to respond with speed. So we spent a lot of time like looking at why this opportunity actually makes sense for the federal government. You have something that really affected small businesses in such a short period of time, and that drastically curbed their revenue potential. So you need to respond to a crisis that has happened quickly with speed. And we believe Square, PayPal, other fintech lenders such as Intuit have really good opportunities to actually distribute aid to these small businesses that are desperately in need of short-term working capital.
Yeah, and it's really cool. I read this story about Square wanting to set up or I think it was on their conference call, setting up a website for gift cards that you could purchase for your favorite small businesses, and the way they were forgiving certain loan payments. Like, it really just seemed like they were on the small merchant side, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another way that they can leverage their network and help people simply help their favorite businesses. And I'd say like one of the other themes that we see across Square is that they're just a really agile company. Like, you don't see many companies that are able to spin up a website directory where any consumer can search by zip code or address and simply buy a gift card to support the local businesses that they love. That's a pretty unique offering there.